She thought he was just the help, but she forgot one thing. He controls the lights, the locks, and the data. Today's story is about a tech director who set a digital trap for his corrupt boss. You need to see how this ends. Hope you enjoy it. If you respect the hustle, hit subscribe. You, black shirt, coffee and water, 2 still, 1 sparkling. The woman didn't even glance at me when she said it, just pointed vaguely toward the lobby and turned back to the circle of folding chairs like I was part of the lighting rig. Her name was Maris Klein, new VP of Visitor Experience. She stood dead center of the Hartwell Arts Center's main presentation hall, running this fake smile rehearsal for some pitch to the Merida Cultural Foundation. Donors, admin staff, couple of execs, all of them sitting there with clipboards and scripts, and not one of them said a word when she told me, to fetch drinks like I was some stagehand. My name's Calder Reeve. I'm 41. I live in Minneapolis. I'm the technical director of this place, and I've kept it breathing for 12 years straight. Lighting, rigging, scheduling, fire systems, late-night floods, last-minute queues. If it runs, I'm the reason. I looked down at my belt. ID badge, master key ring, the Lumencraft Productions tag that basically owns the ops contract here. Maris didn't see any of it, just waved her hand again and said, "Still standing there?" like I'd missed my cue. I had a dozen things I wanted to say. About how she'd been in the building 6 days and I'd signed off on more equipment purchases than her entire department had in a year. But I didn't say any of it. I said, "Sure," turned, and walked. Before we start, share in the comments how's your day going and where are you joining from? And let's continue. Instead of heading straight to the lobby cafe, I cut left into the AV closet off stage left. Slammed the door harder than I needed to. The lights buzzed overhead. I logged into the internal control panel and stared at the heartbeat of Hartwell. Temperature control, lighting presets, backup power routing. Every nerve ending ran through my system. Through me. On the monitor, Maris flounced around the hall with her note cards, rattling off lines about community partnerships, while Rosa Delgado quietly rolled her mop bucket toward the back wall, like she already knew she wasn't part of that community. I nudged the house lights down 2%. Not enough for anyone to notice, just enough for me to remind myself where the real control lived. 5 minutes later, I handed Maris her drinks without a word. She didn't even look up. I stood at the back wall, behind the dimmer console, and watched her rehearse her lines like she owned the place. By the end of that run-through, I'd already made the call in my head. That was the last day Maris Klein walked into my building without a digital footprint or a counterweight waiting on the other side. Boone leaned back in the creaky chair and muttered, "Tell me I'm not seeing what I think I'm seeing." He rewound the feed again, freezing the frame right as Maris stepped into the frame near the staff parking lot, heels clicking like she owned the night. We were in the sub-basement security room, concrete walls sweating and monitors humming in rows. The air smelled like coffee grounds and solder. I was halfway through a bad cup when Boone hit play again, timestamp blinking just after 1 in the morning. Maris walked up like she'd done it 100 times, punched in an emergency code only a handful of us had access to, and held the door for a second figure, a woman in a hoodie, face tucked low. The badge scanner flashed green. System ID, Neve Hollis. That name rang a faint bell. Lighting tech, freelancer. I'd seen her name on crew paperwork a few times, but never at that hour, never in that zone, and definitely not on any approved guest list for the After Midnight archives. Boone clicked to the next camera feed, archive corridor, then scrubbed forward. There they were, Maris leading Neve down the line of metal doors like she was giving a VIP tour. She stopped at one tagged red, prop and scenic storage, restricted access. That door hadn't seen regular use since we pulled half the painted backdrops after a water leak 2 years back. Place was dry now, but the fire risk was high, and every inch was flagged in the safety plan. He turned off the feed audio and pulled up the alert logs. I leaned forward. 15-minute window, same time. Smoke sensors offline. Override code? Maris's. Engineering logs would back that up. I'd check them later just to be sure, but I already knew. No camera inside the room, just the hallway shadow swallowing both of them. No drama, no yelling, just two figures disappearing into a place nobody should be. Boone gave me a look like he was ready to hit the panic button. We flag it now? I shook my head. Nope, not yet. You flag it, she spins it. Says Neve was freelancing off hours. Says she was helping an unauthorized contractor and Maris just happened to be there. She throws her under the bus and walks away clean. He ran a hand through his hair, jaw tight. So what? We do nothing? I slid my tablet out of my bag. We watch better. We set up a shadow log. I want every override, every badge swipe, every single detector failure copied automatically to the Lumencraft server in my office. Quietly. No alarms, no pings. Boone looked at me, real quiet for a beat. 3 kids, a mortgage, a second job waiting if this place ever tanks. If this comes back on us, it better be clean. It will be, I said. We're not faking anything, just remembering everything. He didn't like it, but he nodded. Got to work typing in the config change, fingers stiff. Meanwhile, I stared at the monitor, where the paused frame showed Maris smoothing her hair in the reflection of a glass panel like she'd just wrapped a perfectly normal meeting. That was the moment I stopped being mad and started doing math. I'd spent too long patching over other people's messes. She was the one dragging a lighter through the hallways, and I wasn't letting her burn us down without a record of every spark. I took the old freight elevator up to studio level 3, expecting the usual mix of sawdust, acrylic paint, and half-finished props. Instead, the second the doors opened, I walked into the middle of a quiet evacuation. Cardboard boxes stacked against the walls, fabric scraps and foam costume heads in open bins. Silence where there should have been music and voices and the clatter of rehearsals. Lena Voss stood just outside her studio, shoulders stiff, clutching a rolled-up backdrop in one hand and a neon orange notice in the other. Her mouth was set tight, like if she opened it too wide she might start yelling or crying and never stop. She didn't wait for me to speak, just shoved the paper toward me and said, "This came last night." The notice was stamped with bold letters. Emergency closure, 72 hours to vacate. Cited violations, compromised load-bearing walls, outdated wiring, structural risk. Signed by an inspector I'd never heard of, the kind of name that shows up once and disappears. I scanned the document again, feeling the crawl of heat up my neck. "I patched this wall myself 2 summers ago," I said, stepping past her and running my hand along the drywall seam. "And I rewired those outlets in April. They tested clean. Twice." Lena followed me in, her voice flat. Maris said she couldn't argue with the safety notice, said I should start looking into online options for the kids. She even smiled when she said it, like it was a helpful suggestion. The room looked like a tornado had paused to apologize. Open bins, labeled costume drawers half emptied, a half-built prop tree leaning in a corner like it didn't know where to go. This wasn't cleanup. It was forced retreat. I pulled out my tablet, thumbed through the hazard logs. Lena's studio had a clean record going back years, until one line showed up, time-stamped 2:03 in the morning, 4 nights ago. The same night Maris walked Neve down into the restricted archives. I turned back to her, jaw tight. "You've had 0 red flags for years, and now suddenly your room is a structural threat? Out of nowhere? Not a chance." She nodded like she already knew. "I can't afford a lawyer," called her, and Maris told me, her exact words, "People in your lane usually just move on. Like it's a weather report. Like I'm just supposed to float away." In the hallway outside, I noticed more orange taped to other doors. Dance studio, printmaker co-op, the puppet theater with the cracked window and hand-built sets. All gone silent. All hit with the same scripted fake-out, dressed up as urgent safety protocol. I reached into my back pocket and handed Lena a card I'd kept for years. Otis Vale, he's good, owes me. Tell him I said you're calling in that favor. Use the clause on the back, section 16.3. Say it exactly like that. She stared at the card like it was a relic. You really think this'll work? If it doesn't, I said, then I'll find what will. She hugged the backdrop tighter and nodded, small and quiet, but not broken. On the elevator ride down, I held my old black operations binder tight to my chest. I'd bent plenty of rules over the years, little things, paperwork tweaks, overdue inspections signed off late so a kid's show wouldn't get canceled. Always thought it was harmless, helpful even. But now I could see it from the other side, how easy it was for someone like Maris to take a shortcut I made for good and twist it into a loaded weapon. And if I didn't fix it, I was just another part of the machine grinding people like Lena into the floor. I didn't stop when I hit the ground floor. I walked straight across the dock and around the building, head down, grip tight on the binder. My brain was running hot, too many pieces falling into place at once. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a booth at that gray diner on Washington and 5th, the one with the flickering light over the register and coffee that always tasted like it had been poured through a radiator. Otis Vale was across from me, poking at a slice of cherry pie he hadn't touched. I pulled a fat envelope from my bag and slid it across the table. Contracts, time-stamped emails, vendor logs, copies of badge and override records, all of it. He looked at it, then looked at me. "This is everything?" he asked. I nodded. "Everything so far." Otis didn't say much, just opened the flap, pulled out the stack, and started flipping. I sat back, letting the bitter coffee burn a line down my throat, and told him the whole thing. How 3 years ago, when Hartwell almost went under, I set up Lumencraft Productions as an independent contractor. Kept it quiet, slid in a continuity of technical services bid under a clause nobody read closely. The board accepted it because they were desperate, and I had the only team that could keep the place open without a full shutdown. On paper, I said, the building's still theirs, but lights, sound, rigging, fire systems, all of it routes through Lumencraft's ops contract. If it runs through me. Otis turned a few more pages, found the highlighted clause, raised an eyebrow. This lets you assume emergency operational control? I nodded. If management creates a risk to the asset or the public, it's a kill switch. But it only works if we've got hard proof and board support. He kept reading. You really think this is going to hold up under fire? You try to pull this and lose, they'll blackball you out of every nonprofit in the state. I know. Otis leaned back, folding the contract closed. It's going to be ugly. You could lose more than your job, Calder. This'll cost real money. Probably friends, too. I looked out the diner window at the empty sidewalk, the faded brick wall across the street that used to belong to a jazz club before they turned it into condos. My dad ran a stage about 4 blocks from here. Lost it when the city tore it down to widen the road. Nobody read the fine print. Nobody had time to fight. I watched that wrecking crew knock out the back wall with 2 people still trying to carry out risers. Otis set the folder down. So this is about revenge? No, I said. This is about not letting someone like Maris turn Hartwell into her private ATM while pretending it's about community. He didn't argue, just pulled a yellow legal pad from his bag, clicked his pen, and started making a list. If we do this, we do it clean. No tricks, no spin. She falls on her own trail. That's the plan. Outside, it was starting to rain. I slid the envelope back into my bag, stood up, and told him I'd see him tomorrow. I'd already heard the whole plan once, every line of it whispered through ductwork and bounced off glass. Now I had the other half, the clause she didn't know existed, and a lawyer willing to fight for it. The fan in the server tower rattled like it was choking on dust, but the data kept flowing. I sat in my cramped office off the loading dock, external drive humming, Boone on speaker from the basement. We'd just finished rerouting badge logs and override events into the Shadow Archive, a quiet vault no one in admin could touch. Within an hour, the patterns lit up. Emergency codes used on nights Maris swore she was out of state. Door swipes into donor storage at 2 a.m. under Neve Hollis's ID, while Neve's public Instagram had her working a lighting rig in New Orleans. No way to fake that. It was all sitting there in plain text, if you knew where to look. Boone exhaled hard on the line. I hate this. Feels like we're running a sting operation on our own bosses. You'd rather be the guy who says he never saw anything when the lawsuits come down? He didn't answer right away. I heard his chair creak, then his voice again, lower. No, I'd rather not be the guy who testifies too late. Upstairs, the bookings floor was quiet except for fingers tapping keys and the distant hum of the elevator. Dorian Pike flagged me down with a nervous wave. He had a spreadsheet open, brow furrowed. These are the numbers Maris wants for the Merida file, he said, pointing. Studio occupancy, program engagement, donor visibility hours. It says full capacity use for 5 rooms that have been dark since those closure notices went out. You're sure? He clicked tabs, fast but careful. I pulled the access logs. They haven't been opened in 2 weeks. And she wants this version sent to the Foundation? He nodded, but his voice stayed steady. It's a lie, just saying it straight. I looked at him for a second. Young, sharp, still thought the truth meant something on its own. I leaned in. Then keep your own copy of everything. Save it off system. Don't change a word. That afternoon, I was replacing a ceiling grid in the same office when I heard Maris's voice go sharp. I'm not going to let some junior staffer undermine the narrative, she snapped. You don't get to scream fraud in my house and keep your job. Then silence. The kind that fills a room after something's been broken. Dorian walked out with a cardboard box, eyes wide, face pale. I passed him by the stairwell, dropped a folded slip into his box, and said quietly, Scan it off-site. Follow it if you're still this brave tomorrow. He didn't speak, just nodded once. The slip didn't have any words, just a QR code. Led to a private portal I built under Lumencraft's server tree. Clean, secure, untouchable. A place where the numbers could breathe. That night, while locking the stage door, Rosa caught me near the mop sink. She was holding a clipboard, switching between Spanish and English, voice shaky. She say she want to switch to hotel contractor, pay by room, no benefits, she said. No hours, no overtime, just checklist. I met her eyes. Don't sign anything without letting me look, and pull every safety complaint your crew ever filed. Dates, photos, names. Keep it close. She nodded, tight-lipped. But there was something in her stance that hadn't been there before. Not fear. Readiness. I left the building just after 11. At midnight, my phone buzzed. Encrypted upload confirmed. Sender, D. Pike. Folder title, Before Edits. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just my fight anymore. I was hauling a coil of cable through the loading bay, trying to shake the tightness that had been in my chest since Dorian's file hit the archive, when a woman stepped out from behind one of the support columns and said my name like a half-question. Calder Reeve? She had a faded denim jacket, frayed around the cuffs, and she kept one hand on the strap of her bag like she wasn't sure if she was about to get yelled at or escorted out. I'm Neve Hollis, she said. I need 5 minutes, no cameras, and not with her anywhere close. She tilted her head toward the main building like Maris could hear us through drywall and concrete. I studied her for a second. She looked exhausted. Not scared exactly, more like someone who'd run out of ways to avoid the conversation and was showing up because there weren't any more exits left. I nodded once and walked her toward the props closet off the side hallway. It was barely wide enough for 2 people to stand without bumping into each other. Smelled like latex paint and old curtains. I propped the door open just a crack so Boone, who'd posted himself nearby with a clipboard, could keep an eye out. Then I leaned the broom against the middle of the floor like it was Switzerland. Neve stared at the floor a while, then finally looked up. I met Maris working festivals in Oregon. She was big time, consultant, talent liaison, whatever. She started pulling me into side gigs, one by one, always with a favor, always with strings. I didn't interrupt. She kept going. She'd text at 2 a.m., tell me there was an opportunity if I could just show up and be flexible. Said she could make my name in tech if I didn't ask too many questions. Every badge request, every after-hours job, she framed it like mentorship, but it always felt like a leash. She took a breath, reached into her bag, and pulled out a dented external drive. Set it on the paint-splattered stool like she was placing a lit candle between us. For the last year, she said, I've been copying everything. Emails, access forms she made me sign, draft inspection reports with my name forged on the bottom, chat logs, all of it. I narrowed my eyes. You admitting to being on that archive camera feed? I was there, she said, but I didn't plan it. Maris told me it was a calibration walkthrough, told me to swipe the badge. She said she couldn't log in herself without triggering a system alert. Then she said if anything ever went wrong, I'd be the unstable freelancer who couldn't follow protocol. I didn't speak. She opened her phone and held it out to me. Message thread, Maris's name. The words lit up the screen. If the board asks, I'll say you broke in again. You're perfect for the scapegoat role. My jaw clenched. That wasn't just manipulation. That was premeditated insurance. Neve folded her arms. I don't want money. I want two things. Don't let her pin criminal trespass on me. And if this explodes, don't drag my private life into the press just to make her look worse. I nodded. Done. And since we're being honest, I leaned back, arms crossed. I once signed off late on a fire inspection so Lena's kids could have their holiday show. Thought I was helping. Turns out I left a loose board Maris could pry up years later. That was when Boone's radio crackled. His voice came through tight. Annex rehearsal stage. Emergency exit blocked. Kids inside. We bolted. By the time we reached the annex, the catering racks were shoved aside, and nobody was hurt. But the kids were shaken. Tear tracks. Folded chairs tipped over. Scuff marks where staff had to push their way through. And taped to one of the racks, like a middle finger, was a sign-off sheet with Maris's initials. Back in the props closet, I logged the whole thing into 3 systems: safety, facilities, and incident records. Then I slid a visitor badge across the stool. Neve, if you're serious about taking her down, I don't just need a file drop. I need a witness. Backstage was quiet the night before the Merida visit, just the low hum of dimmer racks and the creak of aging floorboards under my boots. I rolled a road case into the center of the service corridor, popped it open, and laid everything out like I was prepping for a rigging install. Dorian's unedited files, Neve's printouts, Boone's surveillance captures, and my own engineering logs. No flair. No color-coded dividers, just raw, dated evidence stacked like kindling. On top of it all, I slid a clean Lumencraft letterhead and started writing. The incident report came out in dry, clipped language, exactly what the board would need if this thing ever landed in court. I itemized the forged closure notices, the false occupancy reports, the midnight archive breach, the conflict of interest emails between Maris and Gavin Rourke, outlining backdoor contracts for Eidolon events. And I highlighted every moment where her decisions directly endangered staff, kids, or guests. By morning, my hand hurt, but the report was solid. Otis met me in the mezzanine cafe just after 7. He walked in with his usual leather bag and legal pad, ordered black coffee, and sat across from me like we were talking about lighting gels. He flipped through the pages, circling clauses in the Hartwell Lumencraft contract with a mechanical pencil, his expression unreadable until he looked up and said, "If this plays out like you say, we've got grounds." We mapped the rest in hushed voices over burnt coffee. Otis would alert the board chair just before the meeting. He wouldn't submit the incident report unless we had something clean, a visible, undeniable moment of negligence. Not suspicion, not interpretation. A hit caught on tape, in real time, in front of witnesses. Down in the security room, Boone sat next to me, eyes flicking between monitors. I showed him the automation script I'd loaded into the presentation system. If anyone used Maris's login to override a flagged tech fault during the Merida meeting, the projector wouldn't display her polished slides. It'd pull live data from the Lumencraft server. System logs, access records, surveillance clips, whatever matched the override's tag. Boone read the code twice. "This won't touch the safety systems?" "Not a bit," I said. "Those are firewalled on a separate layer. This only decides what shows up when she hits the big shiny button." He gave a slow nod. "She won't see it coming." On another laptop, I opened a fresh contract draft. I'd already labeled the section Contingency Enforcement. Otis had suggested it the week before, kill switch language for future agreements. It said any attempt to change core vendors, override protocols, or skip inspections would freeze all changes until an external auditor and Lumencraft both signed off. No gray area, no loophole. I built it tight. That afternoon, I caught the board chair near the west lobby, pretending to double-check exit signage while he fielded donor questions. I stepped in and handed him a slim envelope, the kind that doesn't look dangerous until you open it. I told him, quietly, "You're going to see something on screen tomorrow. If you ignore it, it will blow up. If you act, we'll contain it." He looked skeptical. "This sounds dramatic." "Then read the part about rehearsal spaces blocked by bar racks," I said. "Or the occupancy logs that say studios were in use when they were padlocked. You don't have to believe me. Believe your own numbers." He didn't commit, but he agreed to keep time open after the meeting. That was more than I expected. Backstage later, I ran the trap 3 times using a dummy login. It worked perfectly. The moment that override hit, the system rerouted the feed to the shadow archive. I checked every layer, sprinklers, alarms, emergency lights, all untouched. When I stepped out under the marquee that night, the wind cut across my neck, but I felt steady. If this failed, I'd be blacklisted. Might never work in a venue this size again. But I'd rather be the guy who pulled the alarm than the one who watched it all fall apart in silence. The sun wasn't even up when I turned the main key at Hartwell's front entrance and stepped into the chill of the grand hall. It was dead quiet except for the faint hum of HVAC and the slap of my boots on polished tile. I walked the length of the room, one hand brushing seat backs, the other pushing on each emergency bar to feel the metal give under pressure. Not that I didn't trust the system, I just needed to feel it for myself. Rose's crew was still working, finishing the last pass over the marble floors. She looked up when I passed, and I slid a tray of egg sandwiches onto their cart with a folded note. "From Lumencraft, thank you." Rosa smiled, small but honest. She didn't say a word, just gave me a nod like we were both clocking the same storm coming. In Studio 3, Lena was guiding 3 of her kids through a short scene they'd rehearsed a dozen times already. One was barefoot, holding a handmade bird puppet. Another stood stiffly, mouthing lines under her breath. Lena pulled me aside and admitted she'd almost pulled out after the blocked door, but the kids insisted on finishing what they started. "They said they're not scared of her," Lena told me. "Not if you're not." Up in the balcony, Dorian slipped into a side row, wearing a visitor wristband and carrying a folder under his arm. He found me just long enough to say, "Otis told me to be here in case someone wants live confirmation on the occupancy data." I pointed him to a seat where he could see the whole room and the big screen both. "You'll know when it's time," I said. Neve showed up 15 minutes later, alone. Hair pulled tight, folder clutched so hard the cardboard bent. She looked like she was about to turn around and walk straight out. But Boone stepped into the lobby and gave her a quiet nod, then walked her through to a quiet spot near the control booth. No words, just presence. Around 10, Maris swept in like a stage cue, heels clicking, voice sharp, 2 assistants trailing behind. She barked about floral arrangements, water temperature, and bumped Lena's kids down the program list like it was a schedule tweak and not a gut punch. She didn't notice the looks her team traded, or maybe she just didn't care. Kenji Morita arrived a few minutes later, with 2 foundation reps and a calm that made the air go still. He didn't say much, didn't smile, but he noticed everything. The crooked brochure, the way Maris snapped at a temp, the silence from her staff. Backstage, I pressed the intercom. "We're live." Boone flipped the toggle that started the quiet recording process. Triple backup logging activated. Nothing the audience could see, but every move Maris made from now on was getting mirrored off-site. She brushed past me by the tech booth, tossed a smile toward Kenji, and said loud enough for him to hear, "Calder, go charm the espresso machine. The grown-ups need fuel." I didn't move. "We're all set," I said evenly. She frowned, just for a beat, then turned and strutted off like she'd already won. The house lights faded. First slide popped. I stood at the rear wall with my tablet, watching the room settle. 1 cue away from the drop. 1 line of code between her and the fall. Maris stood at center stage, smile polished to a mirror sheen, clicking through her first few slides like nothing in the world could touch her. Her voice echoed crisp through the grand hall, talking about record engagement, innovative outreach, and artist-centered expansion, like she was unveiling a new Broadway season and not whitewashing a fire hazard. I watched Kenji Morita from the back corner, still, quiet, his expression unreadable. But when she glossed over the recent temporary studio closures, he raised a hand with soft precision and asked, "Are those related to safety inspections?" Some partners we spoke to expressed concern. Maris let out a little laugh, the kind that sounds like someone rehearsed it in a mirror. "Proactive maintenance," she said. "Our safety team is obsessive in the best way, just tightening up our foundation before the next phase." That's when she reached for the touchscreen built into the lectern, announcing she'd demonstrate Hartwell's real-time building intelligence platform. I'd shown the basic demo to her assistant myself, adjust the lighting level, show off the sensor dashboard, make the system feel futuristic. On my tablet, I saw the alert pop on her screen. Caution, restricted override, admin confirmation required. That was her moment. Any smart person would have stepped away and let it go. Instead, Maris rolled her eyes, typed in her PIN, and hit proceed anyway like she was proving something. The main projector flickered. Then the whole presentation cut out. The screen filled with raw system logs, live scroll format, time-stamped and color-coded. Access event, M. Klein, archive corridor, 1:06 a.m., emergency code activated, smoke detection offline. Another line. Override, storage lock zone 3, badge used, N. Hollis. The room stilled. Nobody breathed. Maris froze, fingers still hovering over the screen. Then she stabbed the panel again, trying to clear it. That only opened a new layer, PDF attachments. The fake hazard report filed against Lena's studio. Occupancy charts, side-by-side versions, one tagged original, the other edited by M. Klein. And then came the video. A grainy but unmistakable security feed filled the projection screen. Maris, in a long coat, ushering a hooded Neve down the restricted archive corridor. Timestamp and sensor status banner running along the bottom. Cameras live, detection offline. That's when I stepped out from the shadows and walked to the front. "My name is Calder Reeve," I said, loud enough for the back row. "I'm the technical director here and managing partner of Lumencraft Productions. What you're seeing isn't a trick. It's a mirrored feed from Hartwell's own systems. Nothing has been altered." The board chair sat bolt upright. Kenji didn't move, but I saw him tilt his head slightly, processing every word. Boone opened the side door, and Otis walked in with Neve just behind him. Boone took his post at the exit. Otis placed a stack of printed documents on the table. Neve, pale but steady, stood next to me where the whole room could see her. "I didn't break in," she said clearly. Every time I swiped in late, it was because Maris told me to. She said it was a calibration. She told me to use my badge. When I tried to back out, she messaged me that if anyone asked, I'd be the one who looked unstable. Otis opened the packet and pointed. The messages are here. So are the forged inspection drafts, the badge logs, and the vendor bids that tie directly to a shell company registered to Gavin Rourke. Maris stepped forward, eyes wide, trying to pivot. This is an ambush. He's hacking the system. She's unstable. None of this is... Otis didn't raise his voice. The operations contract states that if a member of management puts the asset or the public at risk, Lumencraft has the right to assume control. Kenji calmly closed his folder. Thank you for your honesty so far, he said, then turned to me. Mr. Reeve, is Lumencraft ready to restore Hartwell's programs and oversee operations with transparency? Yes, I said. We are. Otis handed Maris 2 documents, restraining order and notice of removal. Her badge was already dead, her login revoked. Boone didn't say a word as he escorted her out, but I saw the shift in his shoulders. Same motion I'd seen 100 times when we pulled someone out of a space they didn't belong in. Firm, quiet, no drama. And when the door clicked shut behind her, it felt like the blackout at the end of a show that should have closed 5 months ago. That night, after the Merida team left and the last of the folding chairs were stacked along the back wall, I walked the building like I always did, one foot in front of the other, checking corners, feeling for anything off. Only this time, the keys on my belt felt heavier, not because of weight, but because for the first time, the contract said they were mine to use, not just borrow. Outside Lena's studio, I stopped cold. The orange closure notice was gone. In its place, taped flat against the door, was a fresh white form stamped "Cleared for Use," with my signature and Lumencraft's logo printed at the bottom. My phone buzzed. A photo from Lena. 3 kids in full costume grinning under a hand-painted backdrop. One of them held a puppet above their head like it had just won a medal. Down by the loading dock, Rosa was leaning over a clipboard. When she saw me, she straightened and held up the top page with both hands, smiling like it still felt too good to believe. The addendum was real. Her crew now had fixed hours, required safety training, and written input on any floor plan changes. No more guessing if they'd still be here next week. She didn't say anything, just pointed once at the line that gave her team the authority to reject setups that blocked exits, then patted the corner of the paper like it was a winning lottery ticket. In a shadowed hallway backstage, I found Dorian leaning on a stack of cases, visitor badge clipped to his collar. I told him I wanted him on the payroll, officially. Data tracking, cross-referencing, contract integrity. He was already doing the work. Now he'd be doing it with someone who didn't fire people for calling fraud what it was. In the security room, Boone was watching the screen, not to replay the downfall, but to organize the archive for insurance and legal review. He kept the volume low. I stood behind him until he said, "I'm glad we beat her without cutting corners. No lies, no edits, just the truth, lined up and time-stamped." Up in the lighting booth, I sat alone with my tablet. Otis had emailed the final summary. The board chair and Kenji both signed off on Lumencraft assuming temporary operational control, plus full reinstatement of every community tenant Maris had pushed out. It was done. I thought about the parts I hadn't seen firsthand. Neve, sitting in my office, walking me through everything, eyes tired but steady. Kenji, pulling me aside and saying, "People forget I worked stage crew once. I know how they talk to us when they think we don't matter." I scrolled to the contract revision Otis and I drafted. The new clause was bold and plain. Any attempt to override safety systems or alter vendor control without dual sign-off triggers immediate halt and third-party audit. It wasn't just there to stop another Maris. It was there to keep me honest, too. I walked the center aisle, hand trailing the backs of the chairs. For the first time in months, the building felt like it was breathing again. At the control rack, I tapped the night mode preset and watched the grand hall fade gently to black. Outside, under the sodium lights, I looked back at the glass and brick and made myself a quiet promise. As long as I held the keys, no one was turning this place into their playground ever again. Quick question before you go. Would you risk your job to expose a boss like Maris? If you have hype, tap it, subscribe, and like, and comment with your answer.